So I wanted to read this quote to you that many of you have heard. It's called, well, the quote says that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I know that many of you may have heard the quote before. And the first time that quote was spoken, the author, Margaret Wolfe Hungerford, is the person who first said it. I thought that that was quite interesting, since so many people have said it before. But the fact that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and this exhibit is the photography from these artists, from these places around the world that we have been, that have been in the news, and all of what is happening in each of these places. When you think of the quote, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, that we are trying to capture the beauty of peace. And so this is the point of bringing it all here. So having Chinese artists and North and Southern Korean artists to come and through their eyes to see the beauty of peace is such a blessing. And so the Church Center for the United Nations is a place that has been founded over 55 years now. The United Methodist women, or the forward-thinking women, to gather up all of the, or many of the non-governmental organizations and other organizations that were working towards, are dedicated to the things that make for peace. And so this building is here, dedicated to the very thing that we have been gathered tonight for, and will be for the next 2 weeks. The idea that we are hoping to bring peacemakers, peace builders together, so that we can not only talk about these things, but to use art as a medium to be able to engage it. And so it is an honor to be able, as the chaplain of the Church Center, and as one of the partners for United Methodist Women, as one of the partners with the Mennonite community and with Heng-Gil and with all of the other partners, to welcome you to the space that is dedicated to those things that are made for peace. If you were here in the day, you'd be able to see the beauty of the stained glass behind you. But as we stand in front of the symbols that are here behind us, we see that this is an ecumenical space as well as an interfaith space. And so we stand under the flags, under the cross, and under the Shinto table, and under the Buddhist life wheel, and under the crescent moon, and under the Star of David, all here, symbolizing just some of the reflections of the faith communities that are all dedicated to the same things. So we welcome you to this space, and we welcome you to what we hope is going to begin a dialogue around the things that make for peace. And so it's a blessing to be able to have you all here, and I hope that you're able to tell others about the exhibit, to come back, and to begin to dialogue around this, especially on the 21st, when we're coming together to have these conversations. So again, I welcome you on behalf of United Methodist Women, and it is an honor to introduce a dear brother and friend, Doug Hostetter, who is the director of the Mennonite Central Committee here at the UN. So, blessings.
Thank you. It is a pleasure here to represent the Mennonite Central Committee. The Mennonite Central Committee works in over 60 countries around the world. We have about 1,000 staff, and we work in relief, development, and peace. And actually, our first work in North Korea was 22 years ago, in the middle of the famine. And we went there at that point, basically, to bring relief at a time when people were very short of food. We were collecting food from Mennonite farmers and sharing it with our brothers and sisters in North Korea. We continue to work in North Korea. We were asked to stay after the famine was over, and asked to work in orphanages. We now do nutritional work in 12 different orphanages in North Korea. We have a soy milk plant where we bring soybeans in, and it's converted to soy milk and that is distributed to the orphanages that we work with. But we also work in sustainable agriculture. We've helped to build greenhouses for many of the orphanages that we've worked with. We're working with 3 collective farms, trying to help them to understand how to better, more ecologically work to build up the land, be more productive, to grow better food. But we also realize that what is really essential is to bring understanding and peace between the people of North Korea, the people of the US, the people of South Korea, and the rest of the world. And at a time when the rest of the world is basically saying, we shouldn't be talking to North Koreans, we can't be trading with North Koreans, we can't be discussing with North Koreans, we can't learn to know them, we say that it is absolutely essential that we are working with and getting to know the people of North Korea. It's the reason why we wanted to bring the 3 artists here this summer. Unfortunately, our government prohibited us from doing that, but they couldn't prohibit us from bringing the images that they shot when they were in Beijing. So we have brought them back and we are sharing them with you. A friend of mine once wrote, "The enemy is the person whose story you have never heard." And that's also been my experience. It is easy to hate people that you don't know, that you don't understand. If you want to work for peace, probably the most essential thing that we have to do is to break down the walls that are dividing us, to reach out to learn to know each other as people, to understand the heart of the people that we are working with. Mennonites come from 2 basic fundamental beliefs. One is that everyone was created in the image of God. We are all equal. We are all good at heart. And the second is that the universal that is found all over the world, to do unto other people as you would have them do unto you. And simply using those 2 precepts, we can create a far different world. A world in which we can live together and learn from each other and share with each other, rather than using animosity, hatred, war, violence, and sanctions to try to divide us. We will continue to work to break down those walls. We will continue to reach out to recognize that everyone is our sister and our brother. Thank you.
We agreed to do that. We agreed to invite the 3 artists and 1 curator/writer, and asked, to proceed the project. And then, they, of course, had to issue passport first, the North Korean passport, and then, after that, we have to apply for a visa, U.S. visa, and then, once they get the visa, they will come. So that's the process. So in February, they worked, the North Korean government, what is the first process? Yeah, I actually submitted a number of artists that I would like to work with. So I knew I had a previous, experience working with North Korean art or showing North Korean artworks in New York. So I had some names of artists already at that time. So I submitted the list of artists that I knew to them, and for them to consider to choose. And the North Korean government went through all the list, and then surprisingly, they came brand new name, not the artist that I selected, and or not the artist that on my list, but then they choose a different artist. And then the reason being was that, you know, North Korea is getting sanctions right now, and then most artists we know are from Mansudae Creative Studio, and the Mansudae Creative Studio is, I believe, on sanction. So artists who belongs to Mansudae Studio, they cannot, you know, they can go out to other countries, but they cannot come to U.S. from the beginning on. So the government's understanding was that they're not going to be able to get any visas. So we rather choose, you know, Jungang Artist Studio. Mansudae is the biggest one, the top one, right? But then Jungang is one of the studios, creative studios that are in Pyongyang. So they choose them. You know, the government suggested, you know, why don't you work with the Jungang studio rather than Mansudae studio, because some complication with the Mansudae. So I agreed to that. You know, there's no other way I can do it. You know, so I have to. So I agreed to it, and they, you know, gave 3 names and 4 names. You know, 1 artist and 3 curator, 3 artists and 1 curator and writer. And I okayed that. You know, I okayed their choice, and you know, had them process the passport issuance. So it took like 8 weeks. So we started in February, and then, you know, it became like early April that they actually got the passport, North Korean passport, right? So once they got the North Korean passport, they sent the image to us, the front page of the passport, so that we can process the visa here. So we got that photocopy of that passport, and then I submitted to State Department requesting for consideration giving them visa for the United States. At the beginning, it was okay. You know, they liked the idea. They were supportive. I mean, the State Department was quite supportive, and they would do whatever they can to make sure that the artist gets a visa and be able to come to New York. So, you know, once we got that, it became like mid-May already. You know, early April I got the passport, and I contacted State Department, and State Department took a few weeks to consider, and then, you know, okaying, you know, or not okaying visas. But then they were tentatively okay, and then they asked us to go to online and schedule the interview for the visa interview. So that was like at the end of May at that time. So by the end of May, you know, I delivered that message, go to online in North Korea, and make a schedule for Beijing embassy, so U.S. embassy in Beijing. But then the problem was that they cannot go online. They don't have an internet system, so they couldn't do it by themselves. So they mailed that their paperwork to the North Korean embassy in Beijing, and then one of the consular officer physically brought the paperwork to the U.S. embassy in Beijing in June. Now, the U.S. government didn't accept that physical delivery of paperwork because it has to be online scheduling, because it's an online system. And then in June, you know, they didn't accept the paperwork, and then North Korea came back to me. Well, they don't accept that. So what are we supposed to do? How are we gonna do it? So I went back to the State Department. How are we gonna do it? Because they don't have an online system, so they cannot schedule the interview. From that time on, and it became like July 4th or July 5th, but then July 4th, North Korea launched a test. It was like, I don't know whether there was a missile launch or there was a nuclear test. Something happened on July 4th. And all of a sudden, US State Department got called, They do not want to give any visa, and then they pushed me so hard, make it everything difficult, nothing happened. So we worked very hard for like 2-3 weeks, back and forth, and a lot of communications, and then yes and no, back and forth, So by, I think, mid-June, I believe, as I remember, if I remember correctly, mid-June, we somehow were able to schedule an interview for July 28th. So, in the Washington, not here. So, once we got the visa schedule, interview schedule, so I reported that to North Korean government, and they came out to the Beijing to get the interview. And then on the very next day, we went to U.S. Embassy in Beijing, and we had like a 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock interview schedule, 10:15, something like that. And I thought, by being 9:30 for 10:15 interview would be enough for time, lead time, So we arrived there at 9:30, and I got shocked because there are so many Chinese people who are applying the visa, and in front of the embassy, there were like almost 1,000 people in line, and I didn't imagine that situation. Out of shock, I just ran, front, and then asked the guard at the gate, "Oh, we have like 10:15 interviews, so can you let us in?" It's 9:45 already at that time. So I was trying to negotiate that, and he said, "Don't worry about that. Just stand the line back there, and don't worry about time. We will let you in." So when? Probably in the afternoon. So that was July 29th, and then July 30th and 31st was holidays, so there was nothing going on. So meanwhile, I thought I had a bad feeling that it's not going to work out. So I asked the artist, let's make an art while waiting here. But then artists, as you guys are artists, they didn't have any mood to make art in that kind of a situation, right? So why don't you go out, take pictures then? If you don't want to make art, then let's go out, take pictures, and then just walk. So they agreed to that. So we went out, and then we went to National Museum of China, and then we went to on the first day, like July 29th or 30th, we went to National Museum of China, and on the next day we went to different small parks within Beijing. So we spent 2 days like that, and then they took the pictures, and then that was it. And then on Monday, like August 1st or August 2nd, we are receiving the responses from state and State Department and from embassies and all these people that I sent on July 28th, Friday. And State Department was saying, "Why did you go there? Who said you guys can come out in Beijing?" And yeah, we had an interview, so what do you mean, you know? You gave me interview, so they have to come out, you know, for the interview. They had to be in Beijing for the interview. But then they had no idea why these artists are in Beijing and why I am in Beijing at that time. You know, and I explained in the email, you know, we had an interview scheduled. And then they didn't know that there was an interview scheduled. And they didn't know how that happened, you know. So all this mess going on. Meanwhile, I think July 28th, in 10 hours or 12 hours after our interview cancellation, North Korea shot a missile. So July 4th was one. So at that time, things were getting messing up, you know, things were getting messy. And then July 28th, we were standing in the morning, we were standing in line to get the interview, but then the interview was canceled, and then exactly like 12 hours from that time on, they shoot another missile. So, you know, they shoot the missile, and on Saturday, you know, that was a Friday evening, and on Saturday, immediately, UN had a Security Council, had an emergency meeting, and imposed new sanctions, further sanctions on Saturday, which was very unusual. You know, usually those sanctions are made or decisions are made during the weekdays, but then UN was so urgent to impose sanctions that they made Saturday and then Sunday. You know, North Korea says something about that sanctions. Of course, you know, there is a response. You know, bad words coming out from the North Korea, and then on Monday, Trump said, "Okay, we're gonna send a fire and fury," you know, and then that was very bad, you know, when U.S. president said, you know, okay, you know, they will get the fire and fury that the world never experienced. As you know, by hearing these messages, by what's going on with the embassy, I felt, you know, doomed. And then everyone in New York, including Doug and then our lawyers and then other people, everyone thinks this is not gonna go through. Let's abort the project. That was the Monday I got the message from, or Tuesday, you know, I got the message from New York. Let's abort the project, finish it, wrap it, artists to go back home, and then you come back to New York, and then that's it. And then I said, no, we're not gonna do that. We got new schedule for the new interview on August 9th. So we will stay until 9th, and then we will go through the interview, and then let's see what happens. 50-50. You either get or you don't get. That's it. You know, give us a chance. And August 6th, based on the in response to the Trump's reaction, North Korea government decided about the project, and they sent a message to us through the hotel telegram. Was so wonderful, you know, looking at the telegram like a, you know, 50 years old system, right? Got the telegram saying, come back to the home, come back home by next plane, by the earliest plane. So that was August 6th. And then the earliest plane is August 8th, right? And our interview is August 9th. Doug, let me ask you, what happened on August 5th? What did
August the 5th, the Security Council passed major sanctions resolutions against North Korea.
Okay.
And it was, that was when, and actually then the next day, Trump did his own travel sanctions.
And then immediately sent a telegram, you've got the telegram, you know, come back home by the next plane. And then we tried to convince the North Korean government, we called the North Korean government at that time, and then give us 24 more hours don't, you know, don't let us leave the opportunity, you know, just give us 24 more hours, we will go through the interview, and then, you know, we don't know, it's not guaranteed, it's 50-50, but then, you know, you might get it, then we get it, then we will go. But then, you know, the government says it's not, no longer visa issue, it's a humiliation. We don't want to go through that humiliation. You know, number one, canceling the interview is one humiliation. But then, you know, number two, Trump's robots, you know, fire and fury, and then, you know, U.S. Independent sanctions, all this is humiliation after humiliation. And then the government position was very clear that you will not get the visa. Even if you get into the visa, an interview, they'll not give you a visa for sure. And that's another humiliation. And then by the North Korean standard, the government always protects their people. And the government doesn't want their people to get humiliated by other people. That's one of the crucial distinctions that makes North Korea actually, and that makes the difference. You know, they are very clear about that. You know, any officials in the government says they are, you know, one of the core their function is protecting their own people. So if their people get humiliated or get hurt, they get very angry about that. So that was the issue, and then they just simply said, okay, come back. So artists went back home on August 8th. So that was the end of the project. Meanwhile, you know, while waiting and then dealing with negotiating all these issues, we went out, we took, you know, we tried to be relaxed, you know, and then we made, we took many pictures. And that pictures, they took like over 3,000 pictures or photographs. We went to Summer Palace, we went to parks, we went to marketplace, we went to museums, we went to universities, art universities, and then everywhere we took the pictures, and then I brought the pictures here with the assumption that we're gonna show the pictures instead of art, and we're gonna let people know that what happened, you know. So that's what's happening right now. So I took the pictures, and we have a show downstairs of the photographs that they took in Beijing with other photographs, you know, South Korean artists or Korean American artists took in London and Athens, and then Chinese artists took in New York. You know, appeased them, and then, you know, brought them to a restaurant, you know, and some drink, and then, you know, to cheer them up. But then they were not at all, you know, they were so, you know, look at his eyes, how cynical his eyes is. Because he's ready to go back home on the very next day because the interview was canceled. But then, you know, so anyway, I asked them to stay with me until the next interview. At that time, you know, we didn't know whether we were going to get another interview or not, you know, on July 30th. The next interview came like August 1st or 2nd, so it took a few days. So meanwhile, I asked them to go, you know, out with me and take pictures. And here they are in front of the Chinese Museum or National Museum of China. And this is the show that we saw. This is like an exhibition of artwork, military artists, right? And then, yeah, they took that. Okay. So once we got into the museum, this is Kim Myung-won, and this is Kim Myung. And they are very into this kind of monumental painting. It's a gigantic painting. And this is Mao Zedong, and Deng Xiaoping, and some other Chinese leaders since 1948. You know, communist after the communist revolution, Mao Zedong, and then other leaders were there, and they worked together on the revolution. Now they always go together, and they had a very strong sense of collectivity. They don't go around like when I go with artists to a museum, we all get separated, and then we cannot find each other, and then at the end of the day, we go all separate and go home, and that's it. But then they didn't do that. They always stayed together, worked together, which I find it good. On the one side, I find it good. On the other side, there is no sense of individuality. That's another problem. But then, the upside of that is, the strength and solidarity, which is not necessarily bad behavior. They took the pictures. So this is like that. We are taking the pictures like in this situation. But then depending on how you focus the camera or how you put the angle of the camera, the images are so different, One image gets very bright, the other image gets quite darker. And this is the picture that I took because I was interested in this. This is a paper sculpture. So basically it depicts the trees, trunk, and then these are very thin papers attached to one another. So it can be extended into the long way. I don't know whether you know the Chinese artist who makes the head sculpture, and then out of paper, and then you can pick it up, and then the face just extends up. And he's represented by the Kleinson Gallery. You know that artist?
Yeah, but I don't remember her name.
Yeah.
I've seen that piece. I've seen that piece.
Yeah, like Julian or Apollo, he makes that kind of sculpture out of paper, and then it becomes something else, and then which was very interesting. I think this is a very Chinese technique. I don't think it's the same artist. It's a different artist, but then they are doing that.
It's
but
made by paper. The whole looks like three dimensions made by paper.
Yeah, made by paper. Yeah, they are all made by paper, and then the paper individually attached at the corner. So you can pull it, then it just extends, as long as the paper goes.
One of the Korean artists, they have very similar style of work. Have you heard the name Che-Ho? She has a classic style.
Okay, yeah. So it's quite interesting. For me, it was very interesting, but then for North Korean artists, it was nothing. Pooh, they say pooh. Why is it interesting? It's how interesting it is. It looks like the trunk, but then it's actually not, and it's made out of paper, not plaster or anything. But then they were not into that. So that's the difference. And we talked about those kind of aesthetic differences a lot. What they like and what I like in the museum. We compared each other a lot of times, and then sometimes we argued with each other. And then that's what I wanted to happen here in New York with the New York artists and North Korean artists. They exchange their ideas and then their aesthetic sensibilities, and then argue each other. Which one is right, which one is wrong. Okay. So this is a dinner. They got a little bit up. They chilled up a little bit that day, like it's August 1st. But then we didn't have much money. I didn't have much money, so we saved on the food. Save money on the food. Yeah. So they are looking at. This guy, Myung-won, was looking at which one he should get, he should take, There aren't much to eat. So Hong was interested in people's environment, so he didn't go into he did go into the gallery, but then before that, he was taking so many shots on people or old people, yeah. And I took them, those people who are taking pictures, right? So, and then we went to our gallery in Beijing after the museum. I think it was on the next day. We went to gallery that specializes in North Korean art. And I found some good North Korean art there. This is Hong Song-Kwang made it. Hong Song-Kwang drew that, and that's POWs back in 1950s or 1953. You know, between 1950 and 1953, there was Korean War, and I think the POW exchange happened like 1953, and then many of them went back. Many POWs from North Korea, they went back to North Korea, and then Hong Song-Kwang made this painting based on the oral story that POWs gave to him or to other people. This is the detail of the picture, of the painting. It's an ink brush painting. I found Heng-Gil Han, who is the master artist of graphite, pencil drawings. And it's amazing that you know, he was using such a thick, you know, graphite, you know, medium. That's like 2-3 inches wide, this much wide, you know, one mark, you know, like this. This is like about 6 inches long and then more than 2 inches wide. And you know, in other words, the pencil or the graphite he was using is a stick, graphite stick, so thick. And then he was using that, and which is quite interesting. You know, I've never seen a graphite in a mark that big. You know, it's like a brush mark. And then, yeah. So this is a graphite drawing, and you know, it looks like ink painting, but then he's adapting, you know, the sensibility of ink painting into the, you know, he's using graphite, but then creating the similar sensibility of ink painting, you know, like this. This is a full graphite, and then, you know, it must be graphite stick. It's not going to be a pencil, right? Do you understand what I'm talking about talking about here? Please raise questions if you. This is a painting Park Young-chul made, created in 2000, in the year of 2000, and it depicts the Sinchon massacre. Sinchon massacre is, I think, one of the massacres that happened during the Korean War, and when this massacre happened, Picasso made a work, you know, about Korean War, like in 1952 or 53, and it's the same event, and he's depicting it. It's like a Manet or Courbet style, you know. It's a brilliant painting. I loved it. Yeah. And we walked down the Beijing city, you know, for a long time to find something interesting, you know. Hong Song-Kwang was there in Beijing. He lived like 5 years before, but then the other two people, Myung-hun and Kim Young, were not there. It was for the first time for them to come to Beijing, so they were very curious in everything. So we walked and we looked at, we took pictures, and then that's what we did. And we went to the downtown marketplace, and you know, they were, these people, you know, they were for the first time in Beijing, and they got a little bit lost, you know, by looking at the whole, you know, scene. But then he was familiar with the scene, so you know, he's taking it much easier than these people. This three artists, or the writer and curator, he was curious in everything, just about everything. And then we went out to the marketplace. We went down, near there. We went to a ramen house for the lunch, and then we took a picture. And they didn't want to take underground train, subway train, so I forced them to take a train. And then, I don't know why they don't like the subway trains, but then I insisted for them to experience subway at least once. But then we did few times. And then we are figuring out which train to what direction we have to take. Because all of four of us don't know the subway system, didn't know subway system, so we are sometimes arguing whether it's right train or wrong train, and all these things happened. And this is the South Korean store, and they are looking at it, and they're not supposed to enter the South Korean store, so they're just looking at it, and then they have to go back. And very briefly, it was heartbreaking to look at them, looking at the store, and then say nothing, or just, they had to ignore. But then their interest is not, definitely. They are very interested to get into the store and then to engage people, but then they just couldn't do it, They are not allowed to do it. Yeah. And we went to Summer Palace, and I think Hong-Song took these pictures, who is interested in people. So they took a lot of people, and then, for some reason, these three artists took a lot of pictures of people in Summer Palace rather than the architecture. While I was drawn into architecture, and I took a lot of pictures of architects and the way the buildings are built, all the buildings are built, but then they were not. They were very interested in people, and especially children and mom and children and family members, and family groups. This is the someone home, and I talked to him, what am I looking at? That's from the home's position, He's looking for something and looking at something, trying to find some interesting subject matter. And they took the pictures of each other, Sometimes we had fun by doing that, comparing each other, comparing the pictures of each other, Yeah. And this is the picture I took. I was interested in this kind of minimalist sense. And this is a rooftop, right? And yeah, I took this picture and I compared it with their pictures, and I got this straight line. I found myself, I'm very balanced and symmetry drawn, while they are not, This is pictures right there. So, I was interested in this kind of buildings and architects, but then architectures. But then these people, Myung-Hun is taking pictures of people, all the time. He doesn't take the architecture. He doesn't take pictures of architecture. In the Summer Palace, there is this. This is August 8th, departure date. We went out from the airport, checked in, and a marketplace. This is a marketplace. So this is another picture. Myung-Hun took this picture, but then Myung-Bin took that picture, which doesn't show this telephone cell. I think it's telephone cell or some kind of advertisement, right? It's the same place, but then Myung-won took this picture, and then Kim Young took. Oh, it's not. I didn't change that. Kim Young took. Okay. Hold on. This is not right. You know. Yeah. Kim Young took this picture in the same place, and I was surprised looking at these two pictures. Well, there are some other pictures. You know, how sensitively, you know, the same subject matter changes its aspects, you know, depending on who is taking what. Yeah. And children that they are taking, and we are arguing each other in the survey, you know, which line we have to take to go back home or to go somewhere. Yeah. And in the survey, in the train, you know, the pictures. And then, you know, seldomly Myung-won took the street by the architect building, you know, and I think he took this picture because this building, the shape of the building is very peculiar and particular. So, yeah, Myung-won was into the family and children, as well as other people too. You know, they were very much family-oriented and children-oriented. Keeping yourself. So the focus is again on the people, not statue, not the buildings. Myung-won took this picture of me. I was taking pictures. Remember the rooftop, the minimalist rooftop structure? I was taking the pictures, and then Myung-won looked at me, and he took it, and he came back to me, and then, what are you taking picture of? And then I didn't say anything, and I asked him, what do you think I'm taking pictures? Why don't you shoot a scene here? And then he shoot this. He didn't understand what I'm doing, and then, you know, I showed him later, you know, what I was taking picture of, and then, so that was the moment.